Hey everyone, here we are back again on Saturday, the Saturday Morning Hustle, because we hustle on Saturday. About to record the podcast and video for YouTube all about should you have a podcast or not. It's one of the most common things that I'm asked. I asked you last week what feedback, what input I could get from you to provide you the correct content for the Saturday Morning Hustle. Podcasting was one of those. And there are three main questions. Am I too young or too old? Does anyone want to listen to what I have to talk to? And what should I talk about? Well, we're going to give you the details and answers to those questions and depth and detail on what your podcast should be about, why it could bring value to you as a personal brand, as an individual, as a group, etc., small business, whatever it is. So here we go on the Saturday Morning Hustle podcast. Good morning. It's Saturday. I'm in the office. You know what that means. The Saturday Morning Hustle podcast. Outworking the competition while they still sleep, because we hustle on Saturday and Sunday and whenever we can to create bonus time and opportunity for ourselves. That's what the Saturday Morning Hustle is all about. Now, if you'll remember last week on the podcast, I asked for your feedback. I asked what it is you wanted to hear, what you needed to know, the questions I could answer for you, the insights I could provide for you, the information I could give you as a individual following, listening, hustling along with the Saturday Morning Hustle. One of the more common questions I had was about podcasting. And in fact, there are three very common questions I get on a very regular basis about whether or not you should start a podcast. Is podcasting good and have value for everyone? My basic answer is mostly so. There's a lot of good reasons for a lot of different people to start and have a podcast. But the three questions I get most often: am I too old or too young to start a podcast? Does anyone want to listen to what it is I have to say? And what should I talk about? So we're going to get into depth and detail on that, along with the value that comes from having a podcast. Even if you're not necessarily a full-time professional podcaster, even if you're not an entrepreneur, even if you're not trying to create a social media presence as an influencer or anything like that, there are good reasons, and I'll get into details here in a second, about why you should begin and practice podcasting yourself. So right off the top, the three big questions: am I too young or too old? Does anyone want to listen to what I have to say? And what should I talk about? So number one, am I too young or too old to start a podcast? The answer is no, with a few slight edits to that. No, you're not too young, but if you are under 18, please talk to your parents about what you should talk about, what your content should be, and maybe listen to any of their concerns about making sure that you keep private things private and that you don't put yourself out there in the world where maybe predators or scam artists try to take advantage of you. So if you're under 18, please talk to your parents, consult with them, and then involve them in the process. Allow yourself to speak authentically and talk about what you want to talk about, things that make sense to you when in the pre-18 age, but make sure that your parents can approve it so that you don't accidentally put some information out in the world that the family doesn't necessarily want out in the world. So if you're under 18, consult with your parents, do it with their blessing. If you're 100 years old, you should have a podcast, because what stories, what information, what background are you going to have at 100? That's amazing. If you're 50, like myself, you should have a podcast. If you're 20, you still can have a podcast. You might think to yourself, 20, 25 years old, maybe there are a lot of people who think I'm too young to have a podcast. What am I going to bring to it? That leads into the second question, which is, what should I talk about? The key, it depends. The answer is it depends. Depends on you, the individual. The key is being authentic. Talking about something you actually know about or have experience with, something you have passion for. And I say experience, let me even backtrack and explain that a little bit deeper. You may only have a basic experience, but if it's something you have passion for, something you're building on, working towards, maybe it's your career field, maybe it's because you're an artist or a musician, maybe it's because of a hobby you have or a side interest, or you're trying to create a startup and it's not a real startup yet. It's on paper, it's an idea, it's something you're talking about with with friends, etc. Whatever it is, you can speak authentically about what you know about it right now, today, how that fits into the world. You know a little, you know a lot, you know everything. You're an expert, you're a beginner, you're a novice. And the process, what you're learning as you move along, as you learn things. Even if you know a lot about a subject, if you have a ton of experience, there are still things you learn on a regular basis. And those things can be translated into storytelling or insight sharing on a podcast. As long as you're honest and upfront with your audience, you tell them, I'm beginning this journey, come along with me, or I have a great deal of experience, I want to share it with you, or I've been doing this my entire life and I have learned lessons and I have insights to share. Long as it is authentic. You can't start something for 2 days ago and call yourself an expert. You also can't tell people you just started doing something when you've really been working on it for 40 years. So be honest, be authentic with your audience. This is the key. Authenticity is the key. What should I talk about? It depends on what you authentically can talk about. What subject matter, what activities, what actions do you have passion for that other people might collectively have interest in or passion for? And then they want to hear, either inexperienced through completely experienced, your lessons learned and insights and information and the way you grow as an individual and as a human being by participating in those activities, and how the listener can also grow themselves by participating in the same or very similar activities. It's like the Saturday Morning Hustle. There's a lot of talk about entrepreneurism, startups, business, but there's a lot of things that can be applied to career growth, to hobbies, to podcasting, to social media influence, to anything that you are working on that needs effort, consistency, etc. The lessons, if you will, that come from the Saturday Morning Hustles, the insight, the things I talk about, the subject matter that we present each and every week can be applied to multiple things. This is something I've been doing for a long time. I have been an entrepreneur since I was a teenager. I have a great deal of experience. That's what my day-to-day, my day job here in the office is, working with businesses, working with entrepreneurs, startups, building businesses, etc. So there's authenticity to it. So are you too young or too old? No, you're not too young or too old. If you're too young, talk to your parents. What should I talk about? Again, it depends on you. Be authentic, have passion for it. You're not going to be consistent if you don't have passion for it. You can't simply have a podcast simply to have a podcast, or to try to present yourself in some sort of bigger than life scenario, because you won't be able to be consistent in delivery of that message. There's a great old line from Will Rogers, of course, humorist and one of the most famous Oklahomans ever, who said, the problem with lying is you have to remember what you told people. So being honest is better. Being honest is something you don't have to worry about what you've told people, what you've set up before, by being authentic. Authenticity is the key to developing an audience. The whole point of having a podcast is building audience. So authenticity is the key to that. So what should I talk about? Depends on you, your interests, your passions, etc. Something you have passion for, be consistent with, and be real. Just keep it real. That's simple. Keep it real. Now, the third question, does anyone want to listen to what I have to say? Well, if you go back and combine the answers to the first two, who you are, what your experience is in the world, what you have passion for, what you can speak to authentically and consistently, if you can do those things, then yes, people will want to listen. This is a reason that podcasts are huge. This is a reason that social media is as influential as it is, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or whatever the next thing that's going to pop up next week is, YouTube channels, etc. All of the interest, all of the things that come with building an audience are based on what you bring to the conversation, that authenticity, that passion, and that consistency. So will someone want to listen? Yes. If you're consistent, if you're authentic, if you have passion, and if you are doing it for the right reasons. The right reasons? What are the right reasons? I'm going to get into that now. I'm going to tell you all about that. So who should be podcasting and why? Here's a short list. This is not the complete list. Here's a short list of people. Small businesses. As a business entity or a small business owner, you should be podcasting. Entrepreneurs, obviously. Self-brands. If you're a social media influencer, if you're a musician, an artist, if you're building a career based on yourself as a speaker or a presenter or a podcaster or a video expert or some other expert that your name is associated with a subject matter. That becomes a self-brand. Again, artists, musicians, etc., and creative professionals, people whose intellectual property comes along with them as part of their self-brand. These are all the types of people who should be podcasting, people who participate in activities other people enjoy or are invested in. So you could be a video gamer, you can be a board game player, you can play sports, you can be a musician, you can be in a band. Bands absolutely should be doing podcasts for sure. Let me tell you, musicians and bands should be talking about their process, should be explaining their songwriting process, explaining how they rehearse, explaining how they approach the band concept, doing demos on their podcast, like literally rough mix, one mic in the middle of the room and a rehearsal with acoustic guitars type demos on your podcast, and then have conversations, ask for feedback, ask your friends what they think, talk about the process of creating a song, talk about the process that goes into painting a painting or sculpting something or building something. Whatever it is you're into, whatever it is you do, if you do it, you have passion for it, you can talk about it. Talking about it invites other people into the conversation. So you are having conversations with other people. It's not a lecture. It's not standing in front of a classroom and speaking from a script and being studious and lecturing people on what things could be and should be. There's plenty of room for that in the world, but podcasts should be interest-driven and interesting. Give people information they can't get out of a textbook or a lecture. This is how you can really build a successful podcast. Do not do the same thing everyone else does. You have to have differentiation. I've said that many, many, many times on this podcast and my business podcast, the Golden Group Strategic Growth Podcast. I stumbled on that because we just changed the name of it recently. The Strategic Growth Podcast we talk about all the time. Differentiation. Set yourself apart. Authenticity, consistency. These are the keys. You can do that if you have passion for what it is you're trying to do, and giving people inside information, giving them access to something they normally wouldn't have. If you're a band, you release music, it's complete and finished and it's the final, you're going to love this song and the video that goes along with it. Give people the process, the behind the scenes, how you made the decisions you did, the alternative versions, etc. If you're an entrepreneur, you will get more no's than yeses. You will make more mistakes than be successful. You will have more roadblocks than getting past those roadblocks. You will get more setbacks than moving forward. It happens to everyone. It's not just you. It's all of us. Talk about the process, lessons learned, how you achieved it, how you kept motivated, how you got past the things that slowed you down, stopped you, moved you in a direction you weren't expecting, etc. Because that process, A, is educational, it's informational, and then it connects you to the person listening. They're interested in entrepreneurism, if they're interested in startups, if they're interested in running a business, your lessons learned, the things you learned from making mistakes yourself can benefit them as well, motivate them, etc. So have direct conversations with your audience. Direct conversations with, not at, with. You're also going to eventually ask for feedback. I did this last week, specifically spent a whole podcast episode asking for your feedback, what it is you wanted to hear more of, the things you like to hear, the questions I can answer, etc. on the Saturday Morning Hustle podcast. You can do the same. So talk about your process, talk about what you're doing, talk about your interests, talk about your passion, provide your expertise, and tell your story, both at the same time. And again, you could be in a range of a complete beginner through a complete expert in a subject matter. Express the expertise you have today through this process and how you gain expertise as you move through the process. Authenticity is the key in there. And tell your story. Why did you start? Why do you continue? How do you stay motivated? What are the lessons learned? How are you similar as the host, as the speaker on the podcast to the audience who's listening? Make that connection with them. Create community around what you're trying to do by being authentic, sharing with them, keeping it real, and telling your story by presenting your expertise, telling your story, showing the process, behind the scenes, the access that they can't normally get to the finished product. They might hear the song from your band. They might see the marketing efforts from your business, whether it's a startup or existing business. They might see the finished piece of art. They may see the complete video that you produce. Explain how you got there, what you learned from it, and how your expertise is expanding. Also allows people to be pulled into you, and at some point maybe want to hire you, want to work with you. Maybe they want to sponsor your podcast. Maybe they want to engage you in some way because you're explaining the process, you're being real and authentic with them, and you're demonstrating your expertise, you're telling your story. Podcasts are an opportunity to create community, not sell things. You can eventually sell things if you build a community, but don't come on a podcast and tell people about how you worked all week on a piece of art and now it's time to buy it, and here's the price and here's the website you can go buy it. People are going to stop listening because that is a commercial. We have enough commercials in the world. We have enough ways to advertise directly with a call to action. Buy this. I'm not saying to not sell your songs, your work of art, your courses, your consulting services, to have people come and visit your business, brick and mortar, etc. I'm not telling you not to do that, but podcasts are not the place to do that. Podcast is where you build community, you create fans, you create a collaboration, you build conversations around what you're doing. And then when people discover the product or service, the end result, because they know the process, they know your story, they know your passion, they know your authenticity, your honesty with them, the likelihood of them doing business with you, the likelihood of them making a purchase, the likelihood of a conversion goes way up without you ever having to ask for it. And you will actually taint the process if you do ask for it. So again, don't sell anything, tell your story, build a community, create fans, not customers. The conversion to a customer, the conversion to a purchase, I want to support this person with a t-shirt or a subscription, or to tell other people, or to buy your album, or to buy a piece of art, or to buy an NFT, or whatever it is you're doing that you're working on, etc. Maybe subscribe to the private subscription of your podcast that has different content, maybe on your Patreon or on Apple Podcasts. They do subscriptions now, etc. All these things can go into why people listen, engage, and support you. When they become supporters, they will buy things and they will tell other people, they'll support you. They'll create an opportunity for you to expand that community. So focus on building community. Really beneficial for creative professionals, for bands, etc. You know, you're seeing a lot in the media and the news right now about how the college athletes are getting what they call NIL money, name, image, likeness. There's a lot of athletes getting paid to be presenters on podcasts, guest on video shows, guest on media programs, to sell their jerseys with their names on them, to appear in video games, to appear in music videos, etc. Good on them. Great. It's a little bit crazy out there in the world. We won't go down that rabbit hole today, but you can do the same thing. You can create value in your name, image, likeness, and your swag, and your sayings, and your comments, in your courses, and any content you produce. If you build a community around it, think more of like Chance the Rapper. When Chance the Rapper started, he was giving his music away for free, which sounds very counterintuitive. Musicians' only form of income is to sell his music. But what he did was he built a self-brand, he built a following and a community, and then other people were paying him to be in commercials and to do other things of influence, become a social media influencer. Just had a conversation recently with a friend of mine, an event about how bands, musicians, and athletes now are actually getting more paid to be a social media influencer or to be guest on podcasts through NIL and other versions than they are the thing that they're famous for. So become known, become famous, if you will, build a community around your music, around your concepts, around your business, around the why, the story, the reason you do it. Then supporting that business, that band, that piece of art, etc., becomes very easy. So those are examples. Now, the next question is going to be, now I understand why I'm having a podcast. I understand how the content I'm going to create. I understand I need authenticity and consistency. What do I need to get started? Well, this is the easy part, actually. Getting started is the easy part because there's multiple ways you can do it, multiple opportunities and multiple options that fit you, your lifestyle, what you're trying to achieve, your budget, etc. Number one, the key to getting started is just getting started. Do not overthink your podcast. Number one. Number two, done is better than perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect, and your first and your second and your fifth and your seventh episode absolutely do not have to be perfect. I've been doing this podcast for 260 something episodes for many years. No one has gone back and said episode 2 sucked. I'm not going to support your podcast. It's what have you done for me lately? Start, practice, get experience, get better, change things up, add a camera, add a video element or not, etc. So start with the simplest version of a podcast. Start with free apps. The Anchor app is how I started the Saturday Morning Hustle. It's a free app on your phone. There are lots of free apps where you can record and edit the podcast right within the app and then post it, have it connected to iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, etc. So plenty of free options out there. Go look for them, or low cost, $1 or $2 $5 apps on your smartphone. A smartphone, speaking directly into a smartphone with a free app is the way to get started, to practice, to try to figure out how to deliver, how to write a script, what your subject matter should be, etc. So start with free apps. There's also online platforms and editing software that you can upload your audio or your video, edit it online, and then again, post it in various formats across the podcasting platforms of the world. You'll want to do some social media. You'll want to do some promotions as well. Obviously, most of those applications are free as well. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. But having consistency, having an image and a presence on all of those platforms are one that apply to you, your age, what it is you're trying to achieve, etc. Allow you to promote the podcast that you are making. Consistency and authenticity, again, are the keys. Focus on those things as well. Also, podcasting allows you to listen and adjust. That's why you have to start to get the first podcast and the second and the third and the fifth episode done so that you can get feedback. So people can say, I liked this part, but I didn't like this. I would like to hear more of this and less of this. Getting feedback. Start with people you trust, family members, friends that will be honest with you, not yes men, not people who will tell you you're awesome. People who will literally say, this part is great. This part needs work. I don't understand this part. This part makes no sense to me. Maybe this part is hard to listen. The audio quality isn't good enough. You're not in a quiet room, etc. Make those mistakes, learn those lessons, listen to your trusted advisors, then listen to your audience and make the adjustments. And eventually you'll come up with a setup, a formula, equipment, apps, etc. that makes sense to you. The key is to invest what is expected from you. If you are a teenager wanting to talk about video games or music or fashion or just simply pop culture, no one's expecting the setup I have here with a studio and a professional microphone and the pop filter and the video camera and all of that good stuff. You could start with a free app. But if you're a small business, if you're a brand, if you're a very successful band, a very successful artist, a very successful self-brand, you have to step up your game. You have to meet the expectation of your audience and then move it forward, adjust it, and change that expectation by your storytelling, by your authenticity, by your availability, by providing your process and behind the scenes and information they didn't get otherwise from the establishment of your brand and from your mainstream marketing. So set and meet expectations, change those expectations at the same time with your podcast. So if you are an individual, young person, or an old person, maybe who isn't expected to have a podcast, isn't expected to be huge on social media. You never know how people blow up on social media. No one is expecting you as an individual just starting out with your podcast and with your social media post to be fully professional and invest in a lot of equipment, a lot of money. But flip side, if you're a brand, if you're someone who's making a good amount of money and presenting yourself as a top professional organization, group of professionals of a self-brand, if you're a top tier individual, someone who other people want on their podcast, maybe they'll pay you as a social media influencer, or to come and keynote speak for them or participate in many ways as a consultant, etc. in their business, you need to present yourself as a professional. You need professional equipment. Again, you can start with the basic version of this professional equipment. This podcast started on a $25 USB Snowball microphone and a free smartphone app. We eventually develop into all this other equipment and all these other things that we use in our professional life as well. This is a reason, because my professional life as a consultant and as a business developer and someone who works with businesses, with entrepreneurs, with brands every day on a regular basis, also producing, managing a variety of podcasts on a professional level as well. All that's at thegoldengroup.com on our podcast page. Because that's my profession, there are higher expectations for equipment, for quality level, for consistency, and the level of expertise I present to you. I still have to be authentic. I can't talk about things I don't have expertise in, but I am expected to have some expertise because that's how I present myself. That's how I get paid, is through my expertise. So it's authentic to me. End of the day, don't overthink your podcast. Get started, make mistakes, learn the lessons, receive the feedback, move forward. If you have passion for it, you will continue on. If you don't, it'll fizzle out and fade away. It's okay. Take a break, start over, do something else as your mood changes, as your lifestyle changes, as you learn your lessons. And at the worst, you do 1, 2, 5, 10, 20 episodes. You figure out maybe podcasting is for you or isn't. You learn lessons from it and you move on. And you have content that you've created you can utilize in a multitude of ways. So good luck for you on that. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast about podcasts. So multiple times we've talked about podcasts, but specifically today, answering your 3 main questions, providing feedback to what you guys asked me after last week, and giving you the behind the scenes and the process of how I make the podcast and how you can learn from it as well. So stream, subscribe, leave a comment, leave a review. Really appreciate reviews on all the social media platforms. However you listen to this podcast today, please leave a comment and leave a review. I would appreciate it very much. Hopefully it's a good one, but who never knows? So share it with a friend as well. Get your swag, support the cause, support the channel, support the podcast, support all of it through Saturday Morning Hustle swag, Entrepreneur AF, and Coffee and Donut swag. Follow, engage, social media. You know where we are: Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, the Facebook fan page. We don't have to be friends on Facebook, but you can like the page on the Facebook fan page. Don't miss another episode. This podcast or the Saturday Morning Hustle bonus content, the Balance series. There's a new one coming at the end of this month. The last Monday of every month, there'll be a new episode of that. Of course, every past episode, all the social media, and links to every podcast platform is at SaturdayMorningHustle.com. So it's Saturday. We're hustling and grinding, willing to come in and work hard, come in early, stay late, and earn our success. That's what this podcast is all about. I'm here for you. You have more questions, you have more comments, you want to hear more about what we talked about today, please leave a comment or contact me on social media, DM me, make comments, or email me from SaturdayMorningHustle.com on the contact button. Appreciate you so much. See you next week.
Saturday Morning Hustle. Saturday